I have been podcasting for 300 episodes. Thank you for being here. In celebration today, I'm having my husband Jay ask me your questions that you submitted. Welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 300! I can't even believe it. If you had told me back in 2014 I would be doing this in 2020, I would be like, that's crazy. I've been doing it for 5 years. I guess it's going to be 6 years this April. That's crazy. I don't know how that math works out, but welcome. I asked you, the listeners, who are over in the Facebook group, which you can find at facebook.com/groups/TaraSwagger. I asked you what you wanted me to do, and you voted on a Q&A where you asked me your questions, your submitted questions, and we have Jay ask me your questions, which he also will help answer. And so that's what we're doing today. So here, now Jay is with me to ask me questions that you guys have sent in.
Hello, I'm Jay.
My husband of 15 years, also business help. I was going to say partner, but he edits these podcasts.
I edit the podcasts. I do graphic design occasionally. Okay. Teresa of Serenity Ranch Handmade says that she has so many questions. I know you've mentioned before about how you started spinning yarn and selling it and then branched out as you found better ways to be profitable. How long did it take your business to grow where you were comfortable with it?
Okay, so this is tricky because everybody's going to have their different comfort level. Do you mean how long did it take me to switch from yarn to what I'm doing now? Or
did you have a big overall plan for the blog and the podcast or teaching, or did you just adjust it as you went along and let things evolve? Is there a schedule, like a set schedule for each time of the week?
Yeah. So when I started out, I started spinning yarn and selling it, and I quit my day job. So I'm just going to do a timeline to ground us in what we're talking about. I started my business in 2006. I was selling yarn to the local yarn shop where I also got a job while I had another job. I've always had 5 jobs at once. And then I put it on Etsy. I was one of the first shops to put it on Etsy. That didn't do anything. He built a website for me by hand, which is generally
by hand. She means I coded the HTML.
Right, that's by hand. That's as crafty as you can get with a website back in the day. It didn't have buy buttons because we didn't know how to do that. And then I went back to Etsy and I got really, really regular with Etsy. And in between selling at the local art supply store and a yarn shop or two and selling online, it grew to the point where I quit my day job in 2009. And if the question is how long did it take until I was comfortable doing that? It was 3 years, but it wasn't really the amount of time. It was also, during those 3 years, I worked a full-time job the whole time. It's not about the matter of time. I had some things I wanted to hit, some goals I wanted to hit before I would quit my job. And then they were getting rid of jobs where I worked. So they were doing buyouts of people and you could apply to get a buyout. So that's actually the thing that made me decide this is absolutely the time. I probably would have went another year before I quit if that hadn't come up. But I wanted to have, I wanted to be in a certain number of press. I wanted to have a certain number of sales each month, and it hit those goals by the time I got approved to do the buyout. So we decided to leave. The buyout makes it sound like I was given a lot of money to leave. It wasn't. It was your insurance work is covered for a couple months and a couple $1,000 maybe. Yeah, we put towards debt, so it wasn't. Nothing exciting happened. Did I have a big overall plan for the vlog and podcast and teaching? If what you mean is did I have a plan for moving into that before I moved into that, the answer is no. I never planned anything. I've planned milestones and goals I need to hit before I make some other big decision, but I didn't know I was going to do this, what I do now. I never knew that. I wrote my first book in 2012. Before that, the end of 2009, it was December, I decided to do a free Q&A. You called a number and everybody could call the number and basically talk to me live and ask their question. That was the technology back then for being live together. I feel like I'm so old. And then based on those questions, I realized that people didn't understand how to think about marketing. So they would be like, should I be on Twitter? What should I post on Flickr? My age. The answer was no. The answer is, where are your people? Where will they see your work, and what do you need to tell them so that they feel comfortable and ready to buy? Which is the same questions to answer today for your marketing. In answering people's questions for free, I just did it to be like, hey, I quit my day job. Lots of people are asking me questions. Let's go get on the phone. I was spending so much time answering emails of people being like, how did you quit your day job to spin and dye yarn? That doesn't make any sense. And I was like telling them, and I realized that this would be much faster if we did it all at once. I'll send out the recording to everybody who signs up for this email. And then like that email became, I started to share my business lessons. And then I was like, you need to think of this strategically. You need to have a plan for how you're going to think about your marketing so you can make any marketing decision. And I was like, I want to teach a class on this. So I made a 3-week class. During it, I don't know if you remember, we had a bunch of emergencies with like Troy and Dylan and my mom. That then was my first ever class. And then I was like, people were asking class about Twitter. So I did a class about Twitter. And then we did classes about craft shows and selling in person. And then I had a friend who worked at a publisher. She had a kind of a different independent publisher called Cooperative Press. And she was like, you could put this into a book. Send me an outline. And I sent her basically an outline of the classes I had taught and what I included. And that's what I would put in the book. And that became Market Yourself. So I wrote that in 2011. It was published in 2012. I did my first live speaking thing in 2012 at Gather here in Boston. After that, I started teaching classes. Like that went well and I had fun with it. So I did more speaking in person, which the combination of teaching in person and online led me to have a podcast in 2014. And so none of that, at no point was I was like, I'm going to write a marketing book and that will lead to a podcast and that will lead to me teaching in England workshops with a tech editor. Like none of that was planned. You said did I just let things adjust or did I make a plan or I let it evolve? I mean, I let it evolve, but I'm also paying attention to what are people asking me? What do they want from me? And what am I enjoying? So like that leads the next thing. So I'm not just like randomly choosing, like I'm not going to just randomly sell you my crocheted hats tomorrow if y'all aren't asking for my crocheted hats, which are not, because a lot of you can crochet your own hats.
Do you set a precise schedule for your time each week? Or do you just have a plan for the week that you'll work your time around? I want to be...
Yeah.
Teresa sounds a lot like me in that I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to do something, I want to plan out everything that I'm going to do down to the minute details. And I won't move until I finish that plan. Tara is not that person. Tara is like, here's my goal, and here's what I think are the ways to do it. And then as she goes along, she alters whatever comes her way, which is partly why she's been so effective over the years, is because anything that flies her way that's not according to plan, she's flexible and just kind of dodges and moves around and then adjusts for that. Whereas for me, I'd have been like, no, the plan. We have the details. And it would have been a lot harder for me. I've softened up over the years, partially from just being married to somebody who's not as rigid.
Let's just go this direction. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, but like she's very, very good at adjusting on the fly for those kinds of things.
So do I have a precise schedule? What would you say about, do I have each week? Does each week have a schedule? Or what's the other option? Or do I just have a plan for the week and I work my time around?
I think you have a general schedule for the week.
Yes.
So you know this day is going to be the day you record the podcast. You have Starship stuff on Wednesday. You know you need to write something on this day. And you kind of set your days with the goals for the day.
Yes. Exactly.
And then you work around that. Some days it works, some days it does not. Kids put monkey wrenches in everything.
Oh my gosh, snow days. If you're in the Starship, you've heard me rant about snow days. So that's exactly what I do. I sit down each week and I look at the things that are scheduled, because I don't like having a lot of things scheduled that I have to be at a place on time. I've gotten way better about being on time, but I don't like it. It's just like not easy for me. It takes a lot of energy and thinking and planning to make like me dressed and out the door and in a place on time. I make note of those, and then I make a note of what my working hours are. And then within those working hours, I have a general idea of what I'm going to get done that day, except for usually I try to do everything I have to do at the beginning of the week. So Thursday and Friday, I can work on projects. Projects being, what do I need to do to move towards my goal? So whatever my goal for the quarter or the month is, or whatever new thing I'm doing, like I'm moving email softwares, or I'm, putting this webinar together, I will work on that later in the week so that the things I have to get done first. That's generally how I do it. So but I don't know, like today it wasn't like at 11:30 we're going to start recording, because if that had been the case, we would have started recording earlier before we had to go get sis from school.
Okay, this is another question from Teresa. How often did you blog when you started? Do you have a content calendar, or do you just wing it?
What do you think?
I know. She's got a content calendar. It's mapped out for like the next month and a half.
Yeah, and I've actually shared that with the Starship. So Teresa is a Starship member. She's a Starship captain. So I'm going to put that again in the group so that you can find that. It might already be in the files. But anyhow, I'll tag you, Teresa. So if you aren't in the Starship and you're like, what is she saying about the Starship? It's my program where I teach you the basics of goal setting and profitability and effective marketing, all that stuff that I started teaching about when I just got started. And then it's also access to a community, which is where Teresa suggested these questions. I should tell you guys, you can find more about that at tarazweiger.com/foundations if you want to learn what it covers and actually learn a lot about how you can start applying that information to your business right now.
She's also got another question. What made you decide to get into foster care? And then the follow-up questions. Is it emotionally hard to have your kids leave after they've been with you? Oh boy. And when you do have placements, how much time do you spend with related stuff such as meetings, visits, etc.?
Okay, so it's real hard. We still cry.
Yeah, like the first long-term placement we have, I think there was about 3 months. Like we had her for 3 months, and it took me 3 months to where I could get through a day without like having to take a break, go to the bathroom, or go hide somewhere and just like sob. I feel sad saying that out loud. It's weird.
No, it will be helpful for people.
There you go, general public. I have admitted I'm a man who sobs because he misses his foster child.
Which is hilarious because he never cried before she came.
Oh, Lord. I had no emotions before she came. Tara used to joke my emotional range was to Afterwards, I cry at the drop of a hat. I watch movies where kids are good, like kids and families get along. I'm sobbing.
Do you cry in Instant Family? We made the mistake of watching the movie Instant Family, which I highly recommend. We watched it in the theater like 2 weeks after she left.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake. But you should watch it. It's on like Hulu and Netflix. You should definitely watch it.
And I make the joke to my friends that having foster kids is like going on Maury Povich, finding out you are the father, taking the kid home, and then 3 to 6 months later, they're like, never mind, we'll take them back. You don't get the kid anymore. And in that 3 to 6 months, you've fallen in love with that kid. Even at, like the first month is torture because everybody's getting used to each other. And then you're happy from that point forward. And,
I mean, as happy as normal families are happy.
Exactly.
You're still flustered. There's still
rough spots.
Kids are
but
kids.
You start to love the kid. They start to love you. You bond.
You create a routine.
Then all of a sudden it's, hey, guess what? You guys are going home with mom and dad this weekend. Or in the phrase of our first foster daughter, right now. And, that it is harsh.
Yeah, it's rough. I think it might be rougher on Jay than it is on me because I mean, there's a bunch of things. Like, I grew up with siblings. I grew up with a family of divorce, so I would leave my mom for like 6 weeks and go spend 6 weeks with my dad and then say goodbye to him. Like, this whole goodbye, you're not in my life, but I love you thing. It doesn't feel totally new, but I mean, also at the same time, I'm the one that's like most excited to be a parent. And like when we don't have kids, I take it the hardest.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's harder on me since our little girl started calling me mom and then they left. That has been the hardest part, is not being mom. They still call me mom when they come to visit and they just say like, we have 2 moms, and their birth mom is like thrilled with that. She doesn't mind at all. So it's a great relationship and we still see them all the time. We see all 3 of our foster daughters at least monthly, if not more. It's real hard. What made you decide to get into foster care? I actually had a video. I don't even know if I talk about it in that video when I first announced it. I'll link up my foster care playlist where I talk about the process. I talk about getting a new placement. I talk about the court dates that happen with the placement, kind of the timelines you can expect. We had talked about it for years, adoption and maybe adopting through foster care. So like several years ago, I was like, hey, so if we wanted to adopt, these are our options: international adoption, domestic infant adoption, or adopting through foster care. And I remember on one of my birthdays, we were sitting at the Mexican restaurant and you had pulled up the state listing of kids. So there's a listing in every state of kids that are in foster care that are available for adoption right now. The majority of those kids are between ages 11 and 17. We were like, we kind of like, we'll see. If we get to this birthday, we don't have kids, we'll talk about it. If we get to this birthday, we don't have kids, we'll talk about it. And then I was in the middle of my quiet time and I was just like, this was April of 2018. I was like, now is the time. We should take classes right now. So I opened up my phone and I looked for local classes, and classes are only held near us like once every 4 months. And this was in like 2 weeks from that date. They were held at our church down the street, the church we go to. I told Jay, I was like, hey, so they're doing, to me, that's the first time we talked about it for real. I was like, there are these classes. Do you still want to do that? And you were like, yeah, we should go. The first class is an info meeting. Anybody can go. You're not committing to anything. And then there's 4 weeks of education classes, and then like a CPR and med administration class. And then you have home visits. I've went through all that in the videos. I don't know if we could give an answer for how we decided.
Yeah, I don't really think there was like one like crystal clear moment where it was like, oh, that's what we're going to do. It was more of like a gradual.
It was like, let's check this out. Oh, okay, that's what it would be. Let's go to the classes. We have the time. It's near us. It'll be another 3 or 4 months before it's near us again. Let's do that. And then we went to the classes, and I remember one night we drove home when they talk about that the goal of foster care is reunification. Like, the goal is not adoption. You are there to help birth parents reunify with their children in cases where that is safe. And I remember you being like, wow, so I did not quite realize that we would be working with the birth parents so much.
Yeah.
And I was like, so do you want to do this? We'll be saying goodbye a lot. And you were like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, his answer to everything is like, oh, okay. So I don't know if you decide anything ever.
I do.
Okay.
I do. Decide what I want to eat for lunch.
Which we haven't done yet.
When you do have placements, how much time do you spend with related stuff such as meetings and visits? Oh gosh.
All of the time. 100% of my time. No.
Yeah.
Okay. In the beginning of a placement, you're going to have a CFTM to explain why they came into care.
Which is a family team meeting.
That's a meeting. That's going to be like 2 hours. You're going to have to take the kids to the health department for a doctor's meeting. And if they have WIC, you're going to have to go to a separate WIC meeting, which is like 8 hours in their first week. And
Easily.
And there's also a court date then. And how court dates work is they tell you to get there at 9 a.m. That's your court time. But then they just see people in order. Everybody gets a 9 a.m. day time, and they just see whoever they want to see. So you might actually be seen at 2 in the afternoon or 11 a.m. So that can be 1 hour or it can be 8 hours. In the first month, you have at least one court hearing. Then you've got another meeting a couple weeks later. So it's like at least 8 hours the first week.
Yes.
And then it goes to, depending on if there's visits, you're looking at 2 to 10 hours a week for the whole first month. And then after that, depending on how visits are going, 2 to 5 hours every week.
Sometimes even more.
Because I'm thinking about CFTMs, but like we don't sit the whole time at the visit.
That's true. Because you'll work generally from like 1 to 2 hour visits at the DCS office so they can observe, to then usually like 2 hour visits where you take the kid, drop them off at like McDonald's, and they hang out at McDonald's for 2 hours, and you pick them back up.
You don't
have to be there.
Right.
And then it starts moving to like 4 and 6 hour visits, and then they'll eventually
where they are like off with their parents, unsupervised.
They'll eventually get overnight visits, and then some like.
And what takes time though is the driving, and then the meetings that you go to or call into, and then the social workers coming to your house. So the reason why I said around 2 hours a week for the first month is because you have your social worker has to come visit, their social worker has to come visit 8 times in the first 6 weeks. They have to lay eyes on the kid, and half of those have to be in your home. Once a placement is not new, like once we're in months 4 and 5 of the girls, depending on how long you have to drive to get places, like I would say we spend maybe 5 hours all month on things that are specifically foster care. Like obviously you have to take your kid to the doctor, you have to take your kid to school and pick them up, visits with aunts and whatever, like, so all of that. Yeah. But in the beginning it's intense. And there are so many things I have to say that are time draining that you wouldn't do with your own kid, that take up a lot of time that you need to do with a kid who's getting used to your house.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say.
So this question is from Don, Fairy Tale Yarn Company. We've kind of answered the first part, which is how long was your transition from a yarn business to a service business? So let's go with what was the hardest part to get used to?
So speaking of time, Jay had to leave to go because it was time to go pick up our girl from school. So I'm going to finish this question without him. Okay, so I did my yarn business up until 2013. I stopped in 2013 because I was traveling to teach, which I loved, and it really made it hard for me to fulfill the wholesale orders I was getting. So I think I closed my online shop in like the beginning of 2013, but by the summer of 2013, I was like, I can't even do wholesale orders. Like this is hard. But I started service-based businesses and selling classes and books in 2012. No, I started selling my first class in 2010. So for 3 years, I did both, which is funny because it took me 3 years to transition. I did both during the 3 years of 2006 to 2009, in that I had a day job and then I did my yarn business on the side. And then in 2010, because apparently I didn't have enough things to do once I was a full-time yarn maker, I did my teaching on the side and my yarn business was my full-time job until the teaching income was increasing and it was decreasing the amount of time I spent making yarn. And then they ran like this through most of 2012 and 2013. And then I just had to close the yarn altogether and do the service-based business full time. And then since then, my business has had lots of shifts. Like some years when I've taught at Creative Live, that has been one of my biggest percentages of my income. Other years, book sales have been a bigger percentage. All through it, the biggest percentage has always been my online classes and the Starship community, because I created that in 2011. So that's the thing. I was still making yarn when I created the Starship in 2011. And then it became really, I think of the Starship as my full-time job since 2013. Everything else I do, teaching around the country and around the world, selling books, making books, one-on-one consulting, all of that is around the Starship is the main thing that I do, because it's where my best work is. It's where there's an amazing community. It's where my heart is. What's the hardest part to get used to? So the hardest part to get used to with a transition from a product-based to a service-based business is valuing myself. So I raised the prices of my yarn a lot while I was figuring out pricing and all of that. And I noticed that every time I raised my price, my sales just got better. And so that was part of valuing what I was making. But then when I was selling my teaching and my consulting and my writing, it's about valuing yourself. And I have struggled my whole life with that. And like to understand the value and why people would pay for it and what I have to offer. Like even though I know I help people, like people send me emails about how much their business has transformed since working with me. And I see the transformation in the Starship members and their confidence, in their focus, in the way that they're getting things done, the way that if they're a tech editor, like their client list is filling up. All of that still makes it hard for me to value my work. So that's been the part that I feel like has been the ongoing hard to get used to. I've really always struggled with the idea that what I sell is me. And I realize now that what I sell is a valuable business transformation. Like, you need to like me in order to get anything out of my podcast or my classes or my books. If you don't like my tone, my voice, my attitude, all of this presentation, you're not going to be able to get anything out of my classes. So that is like kind of the first filter, or like red velvet rope you need to get through. But then what you're buying is the value of the transformation. And that's been hard. Realizing that was tricky. The last question we said for last, because it's kind of silly, is what's my coffee order? Girls, I'm gonna go deep with you on this, okay? Are you ready? If it's my first cup of coffee in the morning, I drink the dark roast coffee with a little bit of cream in it. If I'm at home, which is like now about 80%, 85, 90% of my first cups of coffee are at home, make a dark roast coffee, usually Sumatra, and I have So Delicious coconut creamer I put in it. If I am out, like if I'm gonna work at Starbucks or a coffee shop, I will get their dark roast in a mug with a splash of their half and half creamer. If I go through the drive-through, a venti dark roast with light cream, with very little cream is what I say. Because I made the mistake one time of saying light cream. The person didn't understand, so they put 1% in it. No. If it's before 1, that's probably what I'm drinking. If it's after 1, if we're going to a movie, I'm going to get a fancy latte. If I'm meeting a friend for coffee in the afternoon, which I don't even know, I've done twice in the last year. Usually I meet them for like first thing in the morning, 8 a.m. coffees. But if I'm meeting a friend for coffee in the afternoon, I may get a latte. My most common drink is a medium soy latte. The soy milk makes it like amazing. No sweetener, nothing added. If it's the week before Thanksgiving to like the first week in December, a 2-pump pumpkin spice latte with soy milk. I drink this because it's a special time of year, but only 2 pumps. A grande 2-pump pumpkin spice latte with soy milk. They want to put 4 pumps in it. That's way too sweet. The soy milk makes it extra good. And then if it is the month of December, and I'm feeling Christmassy, especially I do it basically 3 times in December. When we get our Christmas tree, if we go to the movies, and if I'm braving Christmas shopping in person, which I hardly do anymore, I will get a grande 2 pumps each peppermint mocha with soy milk. You didn't know I had so many like deep things to say about this. I didn't know I had so many deep things to say about this. When I go to a coffee shop in my travels, like a new coffee shop, like the coffee shops here locally, I just drink whatever dark roast they're brewing, or I get a soy latte at the Willow Tree sometimes if it's the afternoon. But if I'm traveling, I'm at a new coffee shop, I look at what like their special latte of the day is, or what their special is, or I'll ask the barista, what's your favorite? And I will usually get what they recommend. Usually if it has something honey or lavender or mint, I'll be like, yeah, but with half the amount of syrup you usually put in it. Very serious question. I'm glad we got to it. If you have more questions about the things we talked about today, I've actually done videos on almost all of these topics, so I will be sure to link them up in the show notes. So I have a playlist of all of our fostering videos. I've done a video every time we get a new placement. I do a video when the placement leaves. I've also done videos about specific important points in the journey. And I also did a series of videos when we were first getting licensed. If you guys don't know, I actually recently was hired to be a part-time foster parent trainer. So I just a week ago got certified to teach the 4 lessons that every foster parent in Tennessee needs to go through in order to become licensed foster parent. So I'm super passionate about this, and I decided to add that to the things I'm doing, because I'm always doing more than one thing at a time. As passionate as I am about helping you build your creative business, I'm also so incredibly invested in helping foster parents feel ready for the challenges of caring for kids from hard places, and to really encourage foster parents to work with birth parents. They're not as scary as you think. And by creating that relationship and encouraging them, they may do more than they thought they were capable of. And you may have an ongoing relationship in that child's life for their whole life. So I care so much about that. I was like, yes, I will absolutely teach. It's not changing my business at all. It's only on nights, and it's only when needed, when a class is too big or they just need extra teachers. Getting certified was the hardest part, but now it's going to be very randomly that I do that in the evenings or weekends, and I'm super excited about it. So if you have questions about foster care, or if you have questions about my business journey, I will link up to some videos where I talk about that. The very first episode of the podcast, I talk way more about that process of my whole business life and experience and the lessons I've learned. And I don't think I ever talk about coffee, but I do vlog at least once a month about what my planning process is like, what I actually do in my planner to plan my week or month. So I will share that playlist with you as well. It's below this video if you're watching it. It's in the show notes if you're listening to this on an audio podcast. You can also go to my website, taraspiger.com/podcast300. It is my 300th episode. You can help me celebrate this 300th episode by leaving a rating and review wherever you are listening to this. If you're on YouTube, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below. If you are on any podcast app, hit the 5 stars and leave a rating. That really helps. And if you've liked any of my books, if you have Map Your Business, go over to Amazon and leave a review on Amazon. Give it a star and a review. That super helps me. It helps new people find my work. And if you have been listening for any amount of time and you enjoyed this episode today, make sure you're subscribed. And then come hang out with me on Instagram. Celebrate with me on Instagram. I'm at Tara Spiger over there. I will see you there. Thank you so much for listening. I can't believe it's been 5 years and 300 episodes. Thank you for listening to any amount that you've listened. It means so much to me. And I hope you have a super enthusiastic week. I will see you again next week for episode 301.